Come on in and scoot up to the front. Don't be shy. We're mostly going to be talking here. So what we'd like to do for this last phase is two parts. One is to think a little bit about what you've heard from the various working groups. There are some common threads that rotate around data access, the need to better engage stakeholders in the design and planning process so that happens earlier on in the system, the desire to have better engagement with industry, and thoughts about what the issues are surrounding that, what needs to be done to make it happen, and issues of broad research access to the Arctic. There's been a lot of talk about design and coordination. One of the primary goals of this summit as an ongoing venue is to improve to provide a forum and improve the amount of crosstalk and coordination we're capable of doing. As I said, this is meant to be an ongoing process, so this is the start of what we will hopefully be a continuous dialogue, a dialogue that will be carried out via email, over the web. We've got a website established. You'll see more things coming out from that. It will be a place to go and refer to things, a place to pull information down. So if we think about those common threads in a moment, I'd like to start a dialogue about what we think is missing. If people have an idea of stuff that they don't think was well represented in what was talked about in any of the working groups, this is a really good time to stand up and get it captured. What you say will make its way into the ultimate summit report. So it's a good time to stand up and say those things now. And then after that, what I wanted to do was open the floor and take comments and suggestions about what could be done better for the next summit. This is a new sort of activity. This is something that we embarked upon and tried to decide what sort of shape it ought to have and what to do. Clearly, there are a lot of things that could be done better. And if you have ideas about that, please offer them up now, because we are standing up to begin planning the next one in Helsinki. And this is a great time to interject in that process and offer some suggestions about what path that should take. So with that, let's think about the recommendations that you've seen, the tasking. There were people and entities volunteered in some of those tasks to execute. And in some cases, the tasks didn't have names next to them. And if you wanted to stand up and volunteer now, this would be a great time, because otherwise we're going to go out seeking volunteers. The only way this is going to happen, the only way we're actually going to get action on these things that we've generated as high priority actions, is to have people carry it forward, right? That's the only way this doesn't just fall on the floor after the summit is over. And conceptually, that's what the summit was meant to be, not just something that generated more recommendations of the kind that we typically generate when we hold these meetings, but that also offered a path and some actions forward to make progress on these things. So comments, questions, thoughts? There are a couple of microphones running around the room, so raise your hand.
Yeah, I was promoting observation system simulation experiment, but it's very carefully, we have to do it very careful, because there's something we can do very well by OSSE and simulation experiments, something like distribution of the data or something like that. But some of the aspect model is not ready, so we have to be very careful. But still, OC will be a very powerful tool to design the future observing system, something in location of the future ray of sound in Arctic, how many we need, where do we need, that kind of thing. It's good to test by simulation experiment. Real data is affected by error, but the simulation experiment, we can do more idealized experiment. That's a very powerful tool, and I hope people can aware of that one. Another thing is observational error. I hear many discussion about to make the data available to the community or something like that. But I think people have to think about how to increase the quality of the observation. So that quality of the observation is often related to sampling strategy. So, how to sample the data, and we have to do averaging and that kind of thing. So, and for the weather forecast point of view, it's very important to get to data with less bias. The bias is very difficult to handle in data simulation. So if you can provide the data with little bias by ground observation, so that can be used for calibrate satellite observation. That's also quite important.
Right.
Just a couple of thoughts. During the discussions, I thought as a stakeholder and a funding agency and a former policy guy in DC for Arctic and climate change things, when speaking to leadership about the Arctic and what scientists are doing, and since this is on observing and research, the things they really want to know, because I'm a real busy guy, I got 30 seconds, tell me what you need to know real quick, and if you can't do that, it must not be that important because you hadn't thought it through very much. So something that these types of meetings, this next summit that would be very, very useful would be something like a way to illustrate, highlight, or describe observing systems or networks that are currently existing, that are vulnerable to failure. So that way you can argue for sustained funding. Maybe they're going to make budget cuts and nobody says anything about something that's always going on right now. So it becomes a lower priority, and it's easy if you have to save money to cut this thing. But if you can highlight the significance of it and it's becoming vulnerable, if not refunded, that would be useful. One more would be the sort of corollary is, well, what isn't being done that should be? And leaders rely on people like you to highlight that for them so that they can know what they should do about the Arctic as the leaders and decision makers, whatever. So if there's a way, like my leadership, I think I alluded to yesterday, if there's a dearth of data in a certain region of the ocean, for example, or the atmosphere, and this affects models also, and that can be shown, they're very interested in investing in that and focusing some of their resources on it. And they do rely on meetings like this to help illustrate that more clearly.
So, go ahead.
I would like to make a point from the space agent's perspective as participant. I come from the scientific community, but nowadays I'm more on the space agents. I saw satellite data being mentioned several times, and I voiced it in the group I was working at. And it's kind of an integral part of what the work of many of you guys do, but it's kind of, the sense I have is that this community will take for granted that the satellites are there, yeah, they will be there. That's not exactly how it works. So, yes, it might have satellites there, but guess what? Once they take long to be planned, once the system is up there, it is what it is. If it doesn't respond to your needs, it's bad. So it may be one suggestion that would be for this fora to put some effort towards understanding what's the role of the satellite component as an infrastructure for you, for do the research you do. What's the current status, what role it plays, and what is the importance of it in the long term for this observing system. Take satellite as one of the components you need and put in a strategic way, in a way that you think about, you understand requirements, you understand how you're going to need. So this is a voice that you can take to the space agencies to make sure that the systems you need, not tomorrow, but in 5, 10, 15 years, they will be there. And there will be no gap and there will be no difficulty.
So coming out, the sorts of things you'd like to see from a summit like this would be recommendations that you could use to help justify missions, definitions of what's needed, right? Okay. Other thoughts? So we've had a lot of talk about observing system inventories, right? There are existing inventories. We've talked about the need to actually not just quantify what's out there, but the health of what's out there. Status, how likely is it to remain funded? Is it in jeopardy? In response to Blake's comment, so this is something that adds a little bit of urgency to trying to capture that in the sorts of systems we're putting together.
Just to go one step ahead, I volunteer to support to get the satellite. I would volunteer to help to get the satellite component, at least an inventory of what is in there, what you guys are using, being familiar with the language. It's easy for me. And you guys holding, I need your inputs, everybody, to feed me with how you use it. And I think together we can at least make, at the point of make an inventory.
That would be excellent. You know, that's a tractable task to prepare for 2014?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a volunteer. Great.
That's how this thing will work,
Yes,
right?
that's perfect. That's exactly what's needed. Jean-Claude? Gotta. And then.
Yeah, the Arctic Observing Summit will be a meeting every other year for 3 days. Like we did during the past 3 days. I think it will be important to think about what will be the life of EOS in between, I mean, for the 2 years. Not only thinking of preparing the next 2 years meeting, but 2 years apart meeting, but you know, what would be the life of EOS in between, you know, from a purely methodological point of view.
So one piece of this, we've been having discussions about establishing an online community, if you will, to continue these dialogues. There are going to be some groups that are tasked to carry forward some of the recommendations, tasks that we're trying to get done between now and the 14 Summit. That community might be a forum for them to bring that information back and iterate it with the community in the time in between. When the time stretches out to 2 years, it's going to become all that more critical. The idea of an online community is something that certainly Eric and NSF has been exploring, setting up to support the observing systems. It's something that we're hoping that we're going to be able to tap for the AOS. It's not there yet, but the idea was to set something up that would provide this place for people to come and interact, exchange information, and work on some of these tasks that we've set for them. We had.
So my name is Mark Vardy. I'm a PhD student in the social sciences, doing my research on processes of knowledge translation. So I think that what's been going on here the last 3 days is a really excellent example of very important work in knowledge translation. But in terms of thinking ahead to Helsinki, one of the things that, and I don't know if there'd be interest in, you know, in having support from the organizing committee on this, but I have some experience in doing process evaluation. So not in looking at the outcomes of the meeting, but more the process that we've been through in the last 3 days in terms of putting up white papers, having breakout groups to discuss the white papers, reporting back and all that kind of thing. So we've had some comments along the way around, you know, how do stakeholders get defined and who's defining stakeholders and whatnot. But there have been comments along the way about the process And I wonder if there's any interest in having a more formal way of collecting feedback around the process. If there is, then I would be interested to design a survey instrument which could be emailed out in a month or two after going through a process of checking with the organization committee and seeing if it's going to measure the kinds of things that you're interested in measuring, so that when it comes time to organize the Helsinki meeting, we can have feedback that is being, analyzed thematically just around questions of process.
That's great. Could you stick around when we close and chat with Mary? No, seriously.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should jump on it and start on it. That's great.
Just a note, if you're going to write about us in your dissertation, you need to get approval from your IRB.
Other thoughts about the recommendations, outcomes, or the meeting itself, the process, what we've been through?
Yeah, I just have a general question. So if we take now as a point of departure, so what is the envisioned process between now and Helsinki, and what are we possibly could be doing, or what is the process that you guys envision and building up towards the next meeting, I guess?
So coming out of this meeting, the primary products, there's going to be a writing committee. We may tap some of you to help us out with that, but right now we're forming up to figure out how, who and what, which parts are going to get written. There'll be two parts to that report. As I said before, there'll be a fairly succinct part that's directed at policymakers that will be short enough that they will actually read it, and we'll probably distill down the sharpest of the recommendations that we have coming out of the summit. There'll be a much broader part that attempts to capture what we did here, and that would be the more detailed notes from the working groups, drawing out the common threads, the recommendations as well, the white papers, all bundled up in that's for all of us for guidance going into the future. We're looking at a review paper based on this, and Martin may have identified a journal for peer-reviewed publications coming out of this from the white papers and other things that people might want to try to generate from the summit. There are various tasks that have been stood up. Some of those tasks have names and people assigned to them. We've seen 2 volunteers here to lead other things. Be happy to take more. We are going to follow up on those. So you'll be hearing from us. We're going to try to drive those things forward to ensure that we actually have something by the time we meet again a year from now that represents progress on some of the things we've laid out. There is an organizing committee forming for Helsinki. We do not have names assigned to that committee just yet, but the composition will be different than the committee was for this meeting. You'll be hearing about that in the coming weeks and months. We don't have much time to get this together, so this will happen fairly quickly, just because the horizons are so short for the next meeting.
Thanks.
Hi, my name's Peter Pulsipher. I'm with University of Colorado. I just wanted to say a few words about related to data management and access. Last evening there was a side meeting focused on data management. We had some discussions about the sort of evolution of data management, how there was a good deal of coordination happening under IPY, but now there's a bit of fragmentation, although there still seems to be a lot of need for coordination and for the data management movement. So from that, what we've come up with is a proposal to start a group that would try to link together a number of these national, local, and international initiatives, including, for example, IASC and the movement that's happening there on data policy, the SAON activities. In the US, there's IARPIC, and there's a data access component there. So in terms, just to let the broader group know, what we're intending to do is set up a forum or a group on the Arctic Hub, to set that up as sort of a virtual meeting place, but also to set some very concrete goals for things like demonstrations of data access and interoperability for the upcoming International Polar Data Forum in Tokyo, as sort of an interim milestone, and then ideally something for Helsinki for next year. So if anybody is interested in that or has other ideas that doesn't work for them, then we're open to hearing it. But for right now, we just thought that would be a concrete way to move forward.
Great. That's Miko?
I don't know if some others want to speak too, but still, but maybe I take this as a very formal way of thanking very much for this one from the organizer of the next one, in a sense of trying to bridge it. And as I see that so many people do have a kind of interest to bring in their efforts to it, I just opened a Facebook group, Arctic Observing Summit 2014. It's an open group, so just look for it on Facebook and come there and tell us what you have on your hearts for this. And I think this is one way of getting kind of like this information in. And I'm sure that whatever the organizing committee will then come out will also look into that and be active there, because I think the modern way of preparing this is to have a lot of interaction around it, no matter what and how it is kind of like in a stricter way organized. So welcome to Helsinki next year.
Other thoughts?
So a number of people have asked me about what will happen to the white papers, and Craig alluded to this. And I was saying a number of people have asked me about the white papers and what will happen to this, and Craig alluded to some of the thoughts that we'd have about that. I would welcome, or the ISAC program office would welcome any suggestions for people have, if there's any interest in producing them as a volume out of that project office. It would not be the same thing as a set of journal peer-reviewed publications. But if you have thoughts about how you want to manage the white papers from down the road, if you want to just take your paper and publish it independently, if you could let the project office know just through the AOS email that we've set up, that would be helpful for us in dealing with the outcome of this and also thinking about next year.
Everybody's out of gas? Okay, well, we'll close the comment session at this point and hand it over to Peter and Jean-Claude for some closing remarks.
In order to get to a conclusion for this first AOS meeting, there are probably two main questions we will keep with us leaving this room. What have we achieved here during these 3 days? And I want to include many months before in order to get there with some documents and reports and what need to be done, not only to prepare the next AOS in 1 year. Exceptionally, it will be 1 year from now. After that, we will keep with the 2 years time frame for the AOS meeting. That's the idea. What needs to be done? So we discussed that at length with recommendation, task. I'm not going to list that again. There are a lot of things we have to digest. we are going to discuss some methodology to get the most out of what was discussed here. I would like to stress your attention on several points that it seems there's a lot of agreement on that without any order of priority or importance. We are really struggling for full international participation in this exercise. We missed the Russians, but that will be corrected. They are working with us. It's just a matter of timing and scheduling. This first AOS was not easy to organize. We also identify these data sharing management due to the huge diversity of information we are collecting in the Arctic. This is a real challenge. I can just remind you of the conclusions following the IPY made recently by Dave Carlson, that recognizing that maybe one failure of the last IPY was to get to a high level of data exchange and communication between all the groups. But this is a challenge. We know the difficulties, and maybe with some solutions how to deal with it. There is certainly a problem with logistics and access to sensitive regions in the Arctic. We know that. We can include all the infrastructure problem. We discussed the satellites, in situ observations, working with satellites for validation and ground truth measurements, and all these network of platforms that are emerging. In particular, one of the biggest success of IPY was these sets of autonomous platforms in the Arctic, giving us a picture of the Arctic that we never had before. So this is the way to go, and there is a good hope that we will make good progress in that direction. There are funding issues. This is not news. This is not a new problem. There are several ways to get around that, maybe not in a uniform world, but in more practical ways and to face reality. I think we, because of the cost of everything involved, there is certainly an added value to work hard on this experimental design and how to optimize the situation with what we have, what we can do, and what we can pay for in the benefit of the most largest community stakeholders. That was haunting words I heard during 3 days. Sometimes I like to think of being a stakeholder, waiting for data I need to understand what I'm interested in. I would like, before I give the floor to Peter about the next phase for the EOS, to thank all the keynote speakers, or 10 keynote speakers. We enjoyed very much their presentation. They gave us nice introductions, the nice setting of, and the good tempo about things we had to discuss between all of us. I would like also to thank, on behalf of the EOS Organizing Committee, the 12 panelists, the 2 panels, including the moderators, the 8 breakout groups, and their rapporteur that did an excellent job. We have a lot of information now to synthesize and digest. I would like also to include those groups, 47 white papers, and special thanks to the lead authors and the co-authors that gave us the opportunity to bring a lot of information that we needed to be discussed here. Again, I'm not going to go again on these 8 times 5 recommendations and multiple tasks that we have to think about in a well-organized way. The IPY was the last opportunity we had to provide us some framework to get active in the Arctic in a coordinated way. I remember this summer of 2008 with these 8 icebreakers being in the Arctic all around, but with no connection in between. I mean, from a purely national agency supporting the funding for these heavy logistics, every ship was ignoring the other ones, except the scientists on board, parts of larger international project, Search or Damocles or others, were able to bridge and establish the link in between. I'm sure that we can make some progress in getting in upgrading these organizations dealing with involvement of heavy logistics. That has a cost, but a better organization will be an added value to what we are doing. So we will also discuss with the steering committee of EOS how to keep the link between us. I have the tendency to say that the work is starting now. At least we are, there are a lot of things to be done. And to keep a link between us, would it be through, there are several ways to do that, with maybe keeping an Arctic, an EOS newsletter, or we have to think maybe of dedicated workshops, although I hate to add other meetings to the list already exist, but we have to find a way to keep a link between us and promote these actions. IPY doesn't provide any way of coordination anymore, so we have to be inventive and see how we can create that. We are not living in an isolated world. I mean, I ask the Arctic Council working groups and task force, there are a lot of well-established organizations, so there are good hope that we can be efficient. I think you will hear in the very near future some more concrete conclusions about this meeting once we will be able to wrap up and synthesize all the information that were collected during these 3 days. And it's also time to think about the next year. EOS in Helsinki, I think Hayo mentioned that it's coming very fast. It's almost like tomorrow, so I let Peter to let you know about some concrete ways of doing our effort in that direction. Thank you.
So we are almost done. But before closing, I just want to make a few remarks because it came up in the discussion about the way forward to Helsinki. Just want to remind you that this is a process. of setting up a sequence of Arctic Observing Summit. This first one was a little bit like an experiment. We had to, feel our way into it. Certainly, we learned a lot. We saw a lot of things that can be improved and that will be improved. But overall, I hope you found this experiment worthwhile living through. I certainly saw quite a bit of fruitful discussion. I think the working groups, the one that I was in, I thought was terrific. A lot of connections even on that level were formed. And we actually will have some concrete recommendations that I think can be acted upon. For Helsinki, we already heard that the first platform for communication is out there on Facebook. There will be, as Greg already alluded to, an organizing committee will be formed fairly soon. We will make sure that following recommendations, but also things that we had recognized in the build-up to this summit, there will be a different balance between the individual groups interested in such a summit, on the organizing committee, which hopefully then reflects on the entire audience that will be in Helsinki. I would like to thank our sponsors in alphabetical order: Arcus, ConocoPhillips Alaska, ConocoPhillips Canada, ONR Global, Scottish Association of Marine Science, the Research Council of Norway, the US Arctic Research Commission, and the US National Science Foundation. I also would like to thank our organizing partners. It was a collaboration between ISAC, the International Study of Arctic Change, SEON, the Sustaining Arctic Observing Network, IASC, the International Arctic Science Committee, ArcticNet, the Swedish Polar Research Secretariat, Access, Interact, International Arctic Research Center, SEARCH, Study of Environmental Arctic Change, and the World Meteorological Organization. Would like to express my gratitude to the organizing committee, and here particularly Mary Beth, who had the daunting task of getting us together over many time zones and at all kinds of times that shifted around for everybody, trying to keep us on track to produce what we had set out for ourselves to produce, including white papers and other preps. So thanks, Mary Beth, that was a heroic effort. And without that, we would not have had the meeting that we had. Then special thanks also to those who helped make this workshop run smoothly, including Sylvain, Christina, Olivia, Laura, and Genevieve. And now I am actually put into a waiting pattern because Jean-Claude is supposed to appear again. And I see some waving going on out there. I'm not sure if that is trying to get Jean-Claude back in here or if that is something else. Now that is what I'm waiting for. Sorry. Well, let's start with thanking Liz Marie, because she, together with Mary Beth, really was the heart and soul of keeping that effort on track, sending material, sending reminders, chasing us to fill out doodle polls, and so on and so forth. So thank you very much, Liz Marie. As I said to Mary Beth, without your help and the good collaboration that the two of you had, especially working across an ocean, we would really not have made it through that workshop. Jean-Claude is back, so I would like to ask Liz Marie to come to the podium.
Thank you very much for all of you. Yeah, it's a pleasure, Liz Marie, to thank you a lot for all your hard work. I remember all this conference call, you know, at 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning, so we were always asking, what's the time reference? You know, are you in GMT? Or what are you talking about? So thank you very much. It has been not an easy task, and we all appreciate what you have done to help us to reach this stage for the first EOS. So thank you very much on behalf of the organizing committee and all of us, I'm sure.
So this was really the final action we had to complete. So I would like to thank everybody for your contributions. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Safe travels, and I hope I see